みません。こんなにごちそうになるつもりじゃ。いいな、いいな。毎日こうやって一緒にお菓子を食べましょう。何か趣旨が違ってきて。
Remember the good old days when anime had intelligence, heart, blood, sweat, tears. Now it's just all cute girls. Maybe I don't really remember. But seriously, how would like this show and this show both moe? Like, seriously, do people even really know what it is? On face value, the word moe means budding or to sprout. It also sounds like another word, moeru, meaning to burn in the context of burning passion. In reality, though, it's just a slang term with an unusual and complex history.
作品にかける愛情、そして時間、そして制作費だ。まあこれは我々がどうにかできる話じゃないが。
Being a slang term, it also has a very wishy-washy definition, to put it lightly. So generally it means the following. 1. Verb, to have a strong passion/affection for a fictional character or associations with that character, for example, the voice. 2. Adjective, traits of a fictional character that is designed to elicit the feelings of moe from the viewer. 3. A subculture of hardcore fans that discuss and create works about the character they have moe for. 4. Gay, a bunch of animes I don't like because they're just about cute girls doing cute things with no substance and they're just ruining anime in some fashion. The last one is clearly a joke, but some people really feel this way about this phenomenon and believe it's something recent, which is not true.
戦闘メカザ・ブングルウォーカーマシンコレクション精悍なスタイリングダッカータイプ迫力の重量感ガバメントタイプ極限のディテールクラブタイプ
Back in the early 80s, anime viewing habits hadn't really changed that much from the 1960s. The industry was still very conservative, making anime primarily for children for selling toys. The industry was full of Disney wannabe animators making mecha/action shows for boys and magical girls/fairy tale fantasies for girls because they thought that's what their audiences wanted, unless it was Magical Princess Minky Momo and Creamy Mami, the Magical Angel. With an audience that had grown up on anime and manga, they were used to cute characters in stories and advertising that could range from simple slice-of-life comedies like Suze-san to dark horrors like Azura, the George Akiyama manga. So while it was strange at the time for grown men to be watching shows made for little girls intended to sell magical toy ones, in retrospect it seems really obvious that men could like this too, but it was also a watershed moment in what was expected for audiences at the time. What really stood out about Momo and Mimi from other shows targeted at men and boys was their emphasis on cute but also on conflicts resolved with kindness rather than violence. The strength of the stories in both shows also helped, focusing entirely on character development and day-to-day drama that reflected real life, even if grossly exaggerated with little girls transforming into adults to help their friends. It was the start of an industry-wide focus on characters rather than stories and grand narratives. This is just one example of the nationwide interest in cute new characters, and over the course of the 80s it exploded in popularity along with fan-centric studios like Gainax cranking out content just for fans. This generation of young adults, these fans, refused to conform to society's expectations, with women becoming more independent and men refusing to become salarymen. Instead they chose to become the otaku, the nerd.
On your mark, get set. We're riding on the internet, cyberspace, set free. Hello, virtual reality.
The mid-90s is where the origin of moe blooms and spreads on where else but the early internet. The otakus formed their own little fan groups on bulletin boards. The main discussions were obviously anime and manga of the time. Dinosaur Planet, a short-lived educational anime live-action hybrid about the TV warriors entering simulations of the past, had a main character called Moe Sagisawa, who would often be in danger, and in response the TV warriors would yell out "Moe! Moe!" in concern. The fans took a liking to this action and would then copy it by yelling it out in online discussions of their love for the show and of Moe herself.
Moe, 怪我はない?
The manga series Smash Into the Sun, about the adopted daughter of two tennis players, Moe Takatsu, who wants to be the best tennis player in the world after the tragic death of her father. The series only lasted 2 volumes, but the crowds in the manga would often scream "Moe-chan! Moe Moe!" meaning "Burn it up, Moe-chan!" in support. Another thing copied and discussed online. But what really put it over the top was the character Hotaru Tomoe from Sailor Moon S. And what's interesting is that her last name is rarely used in either the manga or the anime, but as she grew more popular, her last name became more and more associated with those screaming "Moe!" in support of her and fans loving her character. And that's where Moe started, just an innocent little slang term people would shout on the internet to show their love and affection for these types of innocent feminine characters. Like any subculture or growing trend, it can never be contained to the small group it started from. As such, Moe leapt from the internet into the real world and became a product. The Gospel of the New Century, or just Evangelion, was a massive hit in the late 90s and unwittingly created a massive boom in anime production and doujinshi, fan comics, mainly around the characters rather than the setting or plot. As such, fans were fascinated with the two most popular characters, Rei Ayanami and Asuka Langley Soryu. Because Rei was very doll-like, fans were given a near blank canvas to insert her into stories they liked, or to add more to a character and show their feelings of passion for her. Also, Asuka popularized the tsundere archetype, a character that comes off cold but warms up to another character they secretly have feelings for. It wasn't only doujinshi, there were also games, toys, side stories, and because Eva was made by a company of otakus, they knew what otakus wanted and gave it to them. Other companies at the time saw what was happening and began merchandising characters like crazy, hoping to find specific traits that were moe without knowing what moe was. The character Dejiko is a prime example of this, being a chimera of popular fashion items like cat ears and maid outfits. But even though she started out as the mascot for the shop Gamers, she grew in popularity and was made into many doujinshi, figures, and even had a fan club. She even got a manga and anime, but they weren't as popular as what the fans had created for her character. Another key element to the growth of this kind of consumerism of moe type things being made by fans for fans was the rise in popularity of Bishōjo, pretty girl games, especially those referred to as the crying games. Throughout the 90s, the quality of storytelling and characterization in visual novels was steadily improving, and although Classmate, The Girl Who Chants Love at the Edge of This World, You Know, and Two Heart were all very successful crying games in their own right, it wasn't until the release of Canon and the company Key that popularized the genre. The focus on relationships and intimate interaction with these characters to elicit strong emotional reactions from their audience gave them the feelings of moe. Unintentionally so, the creators never intended for people to feel moe for their characters, they just wanted to make a good story. Other companies tried copying Key by making similar characters that emphasized traits of Key's most popular characters, such as kindness, loving embrace, big-hearted innocence, vulnerableness, and a fantasy atmosphere set in a real-world setting like high school. And things just continued like that, with a subculture of otakus obsessing over cute girls and emotional relationships that satisfied their emotional needs, created a strange small economy of fans making products for other fans. But this didn't last long. Like with everything, it became mainstream. In 2004, Shinchocha published a based on a true story novel called Train Man, which was a collection of several thousands of posts on 2channel, a Japanese image board. The posts were organized by a group of internet users, so there's no real author. The novel chronicled the life of a shy otaku standing up to a drunkard while defending a pretty woman, which he proceeds to date with many ups and downs as expected in a love story. The novel sold over 1 million copies, which was enough to catch the attention of Fuji Television, and so a year later was adapted into a film and the highly successful TV drama, which had an average viewer rating of 20%, which is to say a lot of people watched it.
人にもおすすめだからちょっとこっち来てちょっと見てってよさあどうこの切れ味
It's important to keep in mind that Japan has a very negative opinion of otakus, because at this time and still to this day, most people think otakus are like Tsutomu Miyazaki, the little girl murderer. Back in the late 80s, Miyazaki murdered 4 young girls and kept their body parts in his bedroom, which also had a giant collection of over 5,763 VHS tapes, mostly of horror and anime. In the early investigations, the media played this aspect up by calling him the otaku murderer, causing a moral panic for the conservative Japanese society already suspicious of otakus being nonconformists and deviants. So seeing an obvious otaku stereotype trying his best to be a better man for this woman he dearly loved was both enduring and fascinating for the general Japanese audience. However, the success of the series also had some negatives, because this series introduced mainstream audiences to many otaku cultural norms, from how they live to what the hell this moe thing.
嫌がってくれるじゃないか何言ってんだよこらてめえ調子いいんだよこらなんで
Also around this time, the Japanese economy was in trouble, isn't it always? One of the government's solutions was a push to represent Japan as a cool nation, to encourage foreign investors to invest in Japan-owned cool industries. Their promotion was unofficially referred to as Cool Japan. As such, any and all forms of youth culture or popular media was exploited or heavily encouraged, with financing from the government at the expense of the taxpayer, regardless of actual quality or results. So both cute and moe were blended together and heavily advertised everywhere. The more mainstream it got, the more it was misrepresented and became a trope, a pseudo-character archetype you can just insert into a story to try to appeal to what producers think otakus want. The biggest irony of all is that as moe is becoming more well known in the West, there has been a decrease in the amount of shows you could call moe, even though that's ridiculous. As stated earlier, moe is more about the feelings of affection for a fictional character, the relationship. Adding elements that certain otakus like only added more to the fantasy of the character rather than making a character moe. Like, for example, just adding a cat ears to a character might make them cuter, but would still be unlikable even with this purely cosmetic addition if the character's personality is trash tier. Moe has evolved beyond its odd origins of feeling passion and affection for Bishōjo characters, and is now a mix of a movement for feeding people's need for emotional/fantasy desires, and a subculture full of creativity and lewdness. The people that have moe for a character are filling a hole in their lives, allowing them to love someone without the pain of rejection, and allowing them to expand their mind on what is deemed masculine or feminine. It's all about the relationship to this fictional character.
ねえこなちゃん、萌えって何？改まって聞かれるとな。